There's something really interesting about Inuyasha, and in this case, it isn't so much about the series itself, but instead it's about Inuyasha in terms of the landscape of Shonen Jump at the time of its inception. You see, while manga can be made for or made by anyone, for a long time it just wasn't. It used to be incredibly rare for shonen manga to be made either for or by women, which, when you consider that the word shonen typically refers to young men, that kinda makes sense, I guess. They tend to be more action-oriented stories, and in the mind of 1990s Japanese marketing, that implied, why would women like this? However, then came Rumiko Takahashi, the mangaka behind shows like Ranma 1/2 and Inuyasha, a woman not only writing shonen, but writing some pretty damn successful ones. There is definitely a trend in series written by women in Shonen Jump. They do tend to lean a little bit further away from battle-oriented themes, just enough to supplement them with themes of romance, betrayal, fantasy, and much more mature and thoughtful topics in general. Yes, these shows still have a ton of action in them, but more often they'll tend to supplement these things with extra topics on top of it. You can look at shows like Fullmetal Alchemist, D. Gray Man, Dead Man Wonderland, so many more. However, today I want to talk about the influence of that, but more specifically focusing it through the lens of Inuyasha. Because while gender norms play a huge role in the landscape of shonen, it's also played a huge role in the themes behind the characters in Inuyasha. Now specifically I want to talk about the diversity in portrayal of women and contrast them with the portrayal of men. I'll be glossing over plenty of these pretty quickly so I can get to the main focus of what I wanted to talk about, which is how Zero and Inuyasha's characters discuss gender in general. But for now, let's talk about women. When we're looking at the series of Inuyasha, we have a few female characters who catch people's eyes typically. We have Kagome, Sango, Kikyo, Kaede, and Rin. Yes, there are more, but how long do you want me to make this video? So, Kagome at the start of the series is very much a damsel in distress character. Look at the first few arcs and you'll consistently see her being kidnapped, relying on Inuyasha to save her, so forth and so forth, but this does change as the story progresses. And that could be taken as a sign that women don't have to take the backseat role when it comes to these adventure stories. As the story goes on, Kagome becomes one of the most powerful characters in the franchise, having more sacred power than just about any living character. We can then move on to Sango, an absolute badass all the way around who, rather than learning to stand up for herself like Kagome needs to do, she needed to focus on trusting more people, taking more people into her lives, things like that, all of which kind of contrast with her trauma in which all of her family was killed before her eyes. And this ultimately ends with her marrying Miroku to start a new family after she lost her own. Kikyo, much like Sango, is presented to be powerful and confident until we learn a bit more about her backstory that shows her to be someone who had greatness thrust upon her and showed her just wanting to be a normal woman who had a normal life. There's an interesting theme between all three of these characters, and it's the point that they're surpassing vulnerabilities to portray someone who is confident and powerful. Vulnerabilities often being a stereotypical attribute given to women in shonen, and being something each of these characters overcome in their own ways to show them as characters who can stand on their own feet and become something great. Now, other female characters who stand out, as I mentioned earlier, are Rin and Kaede. These two are basically opposites, with Kaede presenting someone who is filled with wisdom, while Rin shows someone who is carefree and jubilant. There are obviously more to these characters, but these are the traits you might attribute to their femininity. On the other hand, we have male characters, who for the most part, we have a ton of badasses. However, each of these characters also have these stereotypical male traits. Here I wanted to talk about Miroku, Koga, Sashomaru, Naraku, and let's even add in Grandpa Higurashi. Miroku's defining traits are 1. He's pretty smart and very spiritual, and 2. He's a goddamn perv. Too much of a perv. Koga is this macho dude who thinks he can claim literally any woman he wants, and has no consideration towards other people's relationships. Sashomaru is this stoic who cares only for himself, and Onigumo is this dangerous bandit who sees the world as something he can take. Each of these characters, much like the women, are able to overcome these traits or have lessons attributed to them. Miroku settles down and has a family. Koga, very much the same, has a relationship with Ayame and eventually learns to understand boundaries. Mostly. Sashomaru meets Rin and learns that it's okay to care for others, and Onigumo was someone who didn't learn a lesson, and as such we saw him turning into Naraku, being fully corrupted. Yes, there's some character development for Onigumo, debatably in the last few episodes of the story, but we're focusing specifically on the moment where he becomes Naraku, giving into his greed and his malice. Now, most of these traits are generally considered to be masculine when presented in media. Perversion, acting like a Chad, stoicism, greed, and all of them have been addressed here. Oh, and there's Grandpa Higurashi, who's kind of acts like Kaede's counterpart as a male elder, and he's basically seen as an old coot who's a little on the crazy side, which is like, yeah, he is, but we still love him. There's not much for him to learn, he's perfect. Now, the big elements I wanted to talk about here, though, are through Inuyasha and Zero. While all the characters discussed so far have had to deal with their gender stereotypes and overcoming them in their own right, Inuyasha faces a different challenge. Yes, he is a guy, and he's quick to temper, jealousy, he loves to eat, and he's a little bit on the dumb side sometimes. Traits typically given to men. But the focus here is that he's also a half-demon. You see, it isn't just the characters themselves who show these traits, it's actually all of humanity versus all of demon kind, both of which demonstrate both female and male traits respectively. And this can be showcased in Inuyasha, who becomes both human and demon. When he becomes a demon, he is brash, angry, bloodthirsty, savage, and just all around shows the worst aspects of what it is to show male traits. However, when he's a human, he is soft, vulnerable, open, and caring. All the traits we often see being attributed to femininity. This extends to just about every demon we see in the show. The more quote-unquote demonic something is, the more masculine and angry it tends to act. And what really made me notice the roles of gender in Inuyasha to begin with was when a friend mentioned the idea of new moons. These periods of times where Hanyo become more human, and by relation through this, more feminine in terms of gender stereotypes. Once a month, they experience times where they're more feminine. The hordes of demons we see that are just unthinking and destructive, willing to fight anything, that's essentially masculinity. And yes, there are demons who oppose this rule. Things like Sashomaru, Koga, Shippo, and Hachi. They're all characters who have arcs that are meant to show them developing and growing away from those things to show more of a balance between this masculinity and femininity. Sashomaru is still stoic, but he can still care for someone. And the same thing is still true in the reverse. Sango is still very badass and powerful, but she can open up to others. Now, we also saw this theme being pushed forward in Yashahime through Zero. When she's crying after Toga's death, a part of herself that she hates very much. And then when she dies, Sashomaru's mother teases her about having a very human trait, and this pisses Zero off a lot. But here's the thing, they all have these traits. Under every demon is this soft side. The idea that masculine people need to hide their emotions and always be this stoic, macho, or cold person, it isn't like there's no part of these characters that care for others. Even Sashomaru's mother, who was just teasing Zero, cares deeply for Sashomaru and isn't as cold as she might let off. Inuyasha is such an interesting look at masculinity and femininity in storytelling because it attributes each character with stereotypes surrounding their gender, specifically to defy the roles or to develop the character away from them, showing that women don't need to be reserved to damsels in distress, nor do they need to be overly emotional roles. They can also be well-rounded and developed. Similarly, men or masculine characters don't have to be stoic, pervs, prone to fighting, or anything else in that lane. They can also show softer sides, even if they're trying to hide them. I think specifically because of Rumiko Takahashi's role in defining a place for women in shonen manga and anime, it really makes sense for her to be addressing these gender norms and development in her stories, presenting the message that anyone can be anything, and the role of a character probably shouldn't be reserved to what's in their pants. But yeah, these are just my thoughts on Inuyasha as a whole and how it presents gender though. Keep in mind, Inuyasha is a story from Japan in the 1990s, so they were most likely writing this based on the theory of two genders rather than the modern perspective. Let me know your own thoughts on this in the comments down below though. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. With that all being said, if you did enjoy this video though, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. You can also check out the description down below for links to my Patreon, my Discord, and my Twitch if you'd like to support the channel a bit extra, or just be a more active part of the community. Finally, a big thank you to our patrons with our Dai Yokai Aikerochu, Jacob Wiley, and Iffy Babes, our Yokai Anal Cruz, Bloodwolf Mon, Jamie Heck, Joker Rose and Lucifina Akuma, and our Hanyo, Anthony Hogan, ICE Wallow Cum, Kiwi Dog, Love the Kiwi, Michael Grayco, Nega Kitty, Samantha Olsen, Savage Camel, and Simon Electric. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.